Count 22 people so far.
That's good. All right, thank you, Hartley. Welcome everyone to the public information session for the Shared Winter Streets and Spaces Grant. I am Veronica Callis, Selectman here in town. Our moderator tonight is Bill Rideout. He is our screen sharer and he will be monitoring the chat as well. So we have several different people tonight that are presenting. And after each one of the presentations, Bill will be monitoring the chat for questions. So if questions come into your mind as you're doing this, as you're watching us present, please enter the questions in the chat. That said, next slide, please. The one before that. To get people outside during the pandemic, the Baker and Polito administration chose to take the CARES Act funds, which is COVID-related funding, and create a shared winter streets and spaces program. This is intended to be a quick build program for improvements to sidewalks, curbs, streets, and parking areas in support of safe walking, biking, and community activities. They want to get people outside and outside in their communities. The application date is March 5th, which is next week, Friday. And if we are fortunate enough to be awarded the grant, we will know March 31st. We then have 2 months to complete whatever we wind up proposing. So that means by May 31st, everything will be done. And if you want to learn more about this, you can go to the mass.gov website to the Shared Winter Streets and Spaces Grant Program. Next slide, Bill. There was a group of us who, after the January 7th grant meeting, worked on this potential funding, the Shared Winter Streets and Spaces. You'll be hearing from several of us tonight, but you can see from this list that there were people who worked on this from different boards, commissions, and departments in town. Next slide, Bill. Townsend has a lot of open space, much of it easily accessible from the town common. And we have a new rail trail under construction. So as we were working on this grant, we adopted as our goals to increase awareness of the parks that you can get to from the center of town, Howard Park, Old Meeting House Park, and the Squanicook River Rail Trail. We want to provide safe, walkable, and bikeable routes for school children, seniors, and all town residents. And we want to encourage people to spend time outside in our community with social distancing. So the next slide, Bill. The grant had many different focuses. We chose the Reimagined Rail Trail and public parks. Next. There is to our grant proposal, and these that people will be people from our funding tonight. The crosswalks, the next lines. The next is bike racks and repair stations, also bike lanes, and lastly, a proposed one-way street.
As far as safety and movability was concerned. As we moved further into the grant process, we had to start narrowing our focus, and we started looking into the center of town, up to Hawthorne Brook and over to Spalding. All crosswalks in town. These be this grant, and there's also engineering restraints. But rest assured, they are all now on our collective radar, and we'll be focusing on them at a later date and another grants. Can I have the next slide, please, Belle? As you can see, our focus areas are labeled A, B, C, and D. D1 and D2 were actually preliminary sites, but not researched or addressed for this grant. So as we go through, please note the difference in the style and paint conditions. The yellow filled crosswalks are maintained by our town, and the striped crosswalks are MassDOT maintained, and those are on 119. The four primary issues that we discovered, or that we really wanted to focus on, were faded paint, and some areas are much worse than others, ADA non-compliance or repair needed, awkward crosswalk placement, and signage gaps in pedestrian, ahead, and crosswalk arrow signs. And although the slides that I'm going to show do not show the signage, we do have a list of about 20 spots that either need or should have additional signage. I'm going to go into just two of the areas tonight in the interest of time. The immediate center, which is area B, and towards Spalding Elementary School, which is area A. With these two, you should be able to get a really good overall view of what the issues are. Bill, can you please show the next slide? Okay, so we have outlined 6 crosswalks within the center. And if you're looking at your screen, we're going to start at the far right bottom. This is 119 at the post office, and other than the fading, our primary concern there is that the crosswalk actually goes right into the grass, which is definitely a problem. So we're going to move up a little bit to Bow Street. That's 119 at Bow Street, and this one goes to a curb on the 119 side. It's got a beautiful ramp up to where the pharmacy is. However, the other side goes directly into a curb again. We move up a little bit to Anderson's Funeral Home in 119, and there our crosswalk actually goes directly into a set of stairs. So not helpful there. It's curb and then stair. Brookline, so then we're going to bump up just a little bit towards the top. Brookline Street in 119, that is next to the Honeyland Farms. Both the town and the state crosswalks there end in a corner curb that has a large cement post, as well as deterioration and cracking of the pavement within that curb. And then Brookline at the Congregational Church, that is up towards the very top. And that right there, we're just looking at possible repairs because it goes to the common and over to the church. And we just want to make sure that that's safe and secure for everybody. And again, just note the difference of the painting here and there because some crosswalks we are going to have to paint and some crosswalks are going to need it this cycle. All right, and then let's go all the way over, and you'll see it in our large picture view here too. This is the intersection of 119 and 13. Luckily for us, these are fairly new and updated. The crosswalks themselves, however, need to be restriped. But the area itself with the directionals, the signage, the lights is all fairly new. Like I said, just restriping. Have the next slide. Okay, this one, we're gonna go, this is area A, heading up to Spalding Memorial School. The reason we're looking at this has a little bit far reaching, and I'll get into that in a slide. First, we're seeing the same sort of situation. 119 and Turnpike Road, there's actually 2 on the far right. Again, you've got 2 bubbles with those. One is state and one is town. And again, we've got curbs and grass. We've got no area going to actually crosswalk other safely. And if we go all the way up to the top, the little circle that doesn't have an extra picture, that is 119 and a situation. And then the third, the big circle right at the bottom that you see, that is actually the Spalding parking lot across 119. And we're going to talk about that in our next slide. If you could, Bill. All right. So RRFB, it stands for Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon. If any of you have driven through Groton lately, you may have seen theirs on their main street. These are the pedestrian crossing posts that have flashing lights on them and have the signs, the high reflective signs with lighting. This crosswalk particularly came to our attention because of basement, not necessarily the condition of the paint. As we were discussing what we thought is danger zones for this area, or highly trafficked for movability towards the town common, towards the rest of Main Street, into the center of town, to our various attractions. This sidewalk being about 45 miles per hour, direct access to the elementary school parking lot, with access for the playgrounds, the ball fields, parents and children. We decided that this was necessary to really address with something bigger than just signs and a repaint. So we are going to be putting in a permit request for an RRFB at that location. And we'd like to give it the full treatment. So restriping, reconstruct the wheelchair ramps, remove the existing signs, and install an RRFB. My final note for how the crosswalks fit within the scope of this grant and what we are doing with them is this. We are lining up painting and signage, and you'll see as we go through the rest of this session, all of the different parts and pieces that we're looking at. Some are town, some are MassDOT, and the responsibility of them. We are requesting permits for a lot of it and looking at addressing ADA compliance for at least 3 locations and improving safety preliminarily at 2 crosswalk locations. We are in the process of confirming engineering that will determine the extent of how much repair and structural improvements we can actually do this time, and what we need to hold for another grant opportunity. So again, just reassure everybody and everybody know that, you know, we actually walked a lot of the town to see where we are and where our deficits are. And we have long lists and a lot of research. And this is just the very beginning piece of what we're looking at for crossing our streets safely for everybody. At this time, I guess I'd just like to ask Bill if there's any questions in the chat, or if anybody has any questions for me.
So I don't see any questions in the chat, Emmy, but let me ask you, do you think you'll be able to get the state permit in time to complete the deadline?
So we're actually working very closely with D3 over at MassDOT to get those permits and to make sure that we can expedite what we need to. We're actually, there's only 4 primary permits that we're looking for, and the rest of the 119 crosswalks and like their restriping, as well as the signage, that's actually the responsibility of MassDOT, and we will be submitting the request for them to take care of that portion of it. So it's kind of a joint process, what we want to do through the grant and what MassDOT is actually responsible themselves.
Great, thanks.
So that must be it for me. Thank you so much, everybody, and certainly follow up with questions at the end if necessary.
All right, so our next session is Wayfaring Signs by Emily Austin Brunes. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. So yes, I am Emily Austin Brunes, and I have served on the Recreation Commission for the last 3 years. I've been a resident of Townsend for 13 years. And I actually never knew about all the trails that we have in town. And many of them I drive by on a regular basis. Up until a few years ago, I didn't know that there was public parking located on Jeff Street. When my husband and I were new to town, we thought that the town common parking lot actually belonged to St. John's. And it wasn't for another few years before we realized it was public parking and that we could park there. And as Veronica mentioned, this committee convened in January, and that was the first time I realized that there was even a street to the left of Evans. So my point in mentioning all of this is that Townsend has numerous natural treasures, wonderful businesses, lovely historical landmarks and stories that so many of us don't know about. And we need to do a better job of promoting all of our town assets. So serving on this grant committee has been wonderful because if this grant is awarded to us, we will be able to highlight so many of our resources at the center of town. Can you please advance to the next slide? In an effort to make more obvious our public parking, the hiking trails, and safe bicycle routes, next, the committee will focus on 23 locations to put wayfinding signage. Next, and a handful of these will be located within a historic district, and we submitted an application for approving these locations. Next, these locations will include directional signage guiding residents and visitors, next, to public parking at these 3 locations. So the Town Common, Jeff Street, and the new Squanicook Rail Trail. Next. The grant will also provide "You Are Here" signage at these lots to provide folks with a way to get their bearings, figure out which direction to go, and hopefully discover other gems of Townsend that they'd like to explore. Next. Perhaps you and your family come to the center of town to ride the bike trail and still have some more energy left to burn before heading home. You could decide to explore by bike or by foot one of the many trails that are open to the public that are hidden in and nearby the center of town. Next, like Old Meeting House Park, for example, and Howard Park, Adams Dam, Trestle Ridge. Next, the grant provides standard signage pointing folks in the direction of the trails with arrows. And next, other signs at the trailheads will ensure explorers know how to proceed safely and where exactly the paths begin so they don't find themselves in someone else's backyard. Next, the committee is excited to support the efforts of the Squanicook Rail Trail. Next, and make sure people are safely able to bike there from other parts of routes 19 and 13. Next, there will be signs to provide guidance to safe bike routes around the town common. Next, bicycle parking. Next, and directional signs so folks know exactly where the rail trail entrance is located. Next. Lastly, the committee has identified, next, 3 locations along the town common where more decorative wayfinding signs can be placed. These Vicksburg posts and signs will include the 4 trails we aim to highlight in this project: the Squanicook Rail Trail and public parking. Next. Although not to scale, the following photo roughly depicts, next, what these signs might look like once erected. The style nicely matches the fencing that surrounds the town common, and we kept this in mind as we selected all of our signs for this project. So that concludes the wayfinding portion of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Yes, we have one question. Does the town currently have any wayfaring signs for the hiking trails?
So most of them do at the trailhead themselves. Like Emmy mentioned, did an extensive walk around town. Some you can see from the road. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't even know where Howard Street was, alone if you went down the street, that there is a trail at the end of the street. So we're hoping to have signage at the beginning of the street so you know where to go to then get to the signs for Howard Park, for example. The same, with Adams Dam and Trestle Bridge. We'll have sign at 119 and I'm going to get this wrong, River Street, right there at the Townsend Rec building and the old library. There'll be a sign directing people in that direction for the parking there, but also the paths. So we're going to be doing that strategically throughout town in the 23 locations that I showed at the beginning of that presentation.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, so our next speaker is Jennifer Eaton on bike racks and repair stations.
Thank you. And welcome to everybody who's joining us this evening. My name is Jennifer Eaton, and I'm a conservation commissioner here in Townsend. And I'd like to share the details of the proposed 4 bike racks and repair stations. I'd like to start. The first location is the rec center. If you could show the next slide. Okay. Do you have the map?
What is red one?
So the rec center would receive a 4 bike capacity, single-sided bike rack and a bike repair station. Can you go back to the bike repair station, please? Thank you. The bike repair station features a hanger arm, so the bike is eye level during the use and of repairing. It also comes with a complete set of tools to do any repairs, such as fixing a flat or adjusting brakes, derailleurs, and stuff like that. The tools that it comes with are fastened to stainless steel cables, complete with tamper-proof fasteners. It presents a slim design with a minimal footprint and a powder coat finish in hunter green. It also has a separate heavy-duty pump that can be used by another cyclist while the bike station is occupied. Club and a bike repair clinic. And the second location is the Jeff Street parking lot. It will feature a 9 bike capacity single-sided bike rack. This would allow visitors to secure their bikes while enjoying the features of Adams Dam. The next location is Depot Street and Railroad Street. This location would provide an 18 bike double-sided bike rack as well as a repair station identical to the one I described at the rec center. And this location would be convenient to cyclists because of its proximity to the bike path. And finally, in the town common parking lot, there would be an additional 18 bike capacity double-sided bike rack. This centrally located spot allows cyclists to secure bikes while visiting businesses or enjoying the town common. So in conclusion, we feel that these items and their locations will provide a safe and secure, pleasant cycling experience in our town. Are there any questions in the chat?
Yep, we have 2 questions.
Great.
Jennifer, thanks a lot. How did you decide on the size of the bike racks?
That is a very good question. And I would say it would be by their location. The centrally located, such as the town common and Depot and Railroad Street would probably get the most use. Depot and Railroad because of the central, because of its proximity to the bike path, and the town common would get more use because of the events in the town common and the businesses.
Okay, so thank you. Our next question is, as much as I like the idea of a repair center on a bike rack, I think it would be better to drop that from the bike rack as its usage would be very, very low, presumably the usage of the repair center.
Well, like I said, the rec center plans to have a program such as a cycling club and also a repair clinic that would teach cyclists to repair their bikes.
Great, thank you very much. That's the last question. Oh, sorry, one more. What are the dimensions of the bike racks?
Oh, I have those right here. So the 4 bike capacity bike rack is about 48 inches. It's 48 inches wide by 31 inches high and 31 inches deep. The 9 bike capacity, which would be in the Jeff Street parking lot, is 110 inches wide, also 31 inches high and 31 inches deep. And the two 18 bike capacity bike racks, that one, oh, it's the same. It's just that it's double-sided. So it's the same as it would be the 110 by 31 by 31, but it's just double-sided.
Great. I think that's our last question.
Great.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yes. So,
all right. Our next section is about bike lanes by Joan Mackwitz.
Hi all, I'm Joan and I'm from Squanicook Greenways, the group that has been working so hard on building the Squanicook River Rail Trail, and we're just excited that it's so close to completion. And the part of this project I took on was bike lanes. And you've seen that we've talked about putting some signage for bike routes, but as we looked at that, we thought that there are a few places in the center of town that really merit having a little more protection for cyclists. And these would entail just painted lines on one side of the street. As we looked at that, we tried to pick a few locations, not a whole. The criteria we used in selecting were of course safety. And we also looked to minimally disrupt traffic flow. We can't really put bike lanes down the center, down 119 and Route 13 because it's just too disruptive for traffic in town. So we tried to pick some quieter places. We looked for places that might have the fewest conflicts with on-street parking, because we realize that not all the businesses have large enough lots and not all the residences have large enough driveways. We also looked at places that are wide enough to have both a bike lane and a traffic lane. So Bill, if you could go to the next slide, the map. So we selected 3 locations with the possibility of a fourth, and we'll talk about that a little later. So the location are on the right, there's Bow Street. On the bottom of the map, there's Depot. On the top of the map, there's part of Highland Street, and also possibly on the lower left, Jeff's, but we'll talk about that separately. Bill, could you skip the next 2 slides for the moment and go to the cross-section diagram? Go to the 3rd slide down. Yep, stop there. So here's a street. Here's an example of a street without a bike lane. So this example shows part of Bow Street, and there is a sidewalk there and the traffic flow. If you go to the next slide. So here's the same picture with a bike lane. So in this case, because we would like to put some of these bike lanes on one-way streets, we need to use something called a Contra flow lane, because we want to allow bicyclists to move in the direction opposite the cars. So it's a little bit of a safety challenge. It requires a little bit larger of a painted line. As you see, there's a little bit of a yellow buffer painted line separating the bike from the car. Next slide, Bill. So I'll just show you real quick what some of these look like. Now here's Bow Street, and we're looking at on the top. So it runs, of course, from 119 near McNabb Pharmacy all the way to Highland Street. So on the top part, on the top picture, the first part of Bow Street is not one way up until Maple Street. And then it becomes one way to the rest of the street. So this is kind of a quiet residential street. I've gone up it on a bike when there's a lot of kids playing. The idea of the bike lane is to give a little bit of extra protection from cars. Next slide. This is a slide of Depot Street. When the rail trail had an engineering study done many years ago, the engineers we commissioned recommended Depot Street as the best way to get from the rail trail to the center of town. So towards the left side of this Google Earth view is what we'll soon be the parking lot at the end of the rail trail. And Depot Street is moving traffic from left to right. So we're trying to put a protected lane that can protect cyclists from some of the cars, because as many of us we felt it needs a little bit of extra protection for cyclists. Next slide. And this is Highland Street, only the one-way part that goes from Evans Clothing over to Route 119. Sometimes it's called Highland Street Extension. Again, the traffic's all moving from right to left. It's used by a lot of cars to not have to go through the light. And it'd be nice to just give a little extra protection for cyclists. It's quite a wide road, so it can accommodate the bike lane. So now, Bill, if you'd run back about 3 slides for this one. So in looking at these, we were posed with another, an additional challenge is how to get across Route 119. You may have picked up that a lot of what we're doing here is sort of to try to keep bicyclists and pedestrians off that main highway. As a bicyclist myself, there's a lot to watch out for when you're trying to cross this route that's shown on this map. There's cars coming out of Depot Street. There's cars pulling in and out of the gas station at multiple places. And there's the traffic on Route 119. So we have a transportation planner who's been sort of advising us on this project. Margaret.
Thank you, Joan. So as Joan said, one of the major goals is to make that connection between the center of town and the neighborhoods to the Squannacook Rail Trail. And so the contraflow bike lanes help with that connectivity. But as Joan noted, Main Street can be a bit of a barrier. So what we're recognizing here is that people of different levels of comfort might navigate this barrier a little bit differently. So we're imagining 2 different ways that a person who's biking along these proposed bike lanes from Bow Street to Depot Street would be able to access the rail trail. If you're a more confident cyclist and you feel confident going in traffic in the travel lane, you might follow the pink line and you might turn off of Bow Street, go up Main Street in the travel lane, take a left when you find a gap in traffic, and then turn onto the contraflow bike lane on Depot Street. Now, a lot of us are not that confident when it comes to biking, especially if there's a lot of cars moving quickly. And so we're recognizing that some people may take the option to dismount their bike, cross the crosswalk, walk along the sidewalk that's next to the gas station and Mr. Mike's, and then get back on their bike and get in that contraflow lane on Depot Street. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is working closely with MassDOT District 3 to understand if there's something that we can do for this segment along Main Street within the constraints of the grant application and timeline to be able to improve that connection, or if that Bow Street existing crosswalk is really going to be the existing facility that will help people make that connection until a longer term project can address this need. Does that cover it for you, Joan?
Thank you, Margaret. Are there any questions from anyone about these bike lanes? So I mean, besides getting people from parking lots to the rail trail and getting people safely around the center of town on bikes, I see this as, to some extent, an advantage for drivers because they can know they can clearly know where bikes might be on these roads. They're not going to appear in the left, middle, right side of the road, coming towards you, going away from you. The lanes are clearly marked. They'll have posted signs, and bikes can stay safely in the lanes and drivers can know where they are.
So Joan, we have one question.
Yes, Bill?
The question is, will there be signs at the crosswalks reminding people to walk bikes across the street?
Oh, that's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that. Why don't we pull that into our discussions over the next few days while we're preparing this grant application and see if we need to work that in.
So I have a question too, Joan. You talked about the flashing light there at Spalding. Any chance it'd be flashing lights at other locations such as this one?
Emily, would you be able to grab that one? Did you work on that?
I can actually. In talking with Mass DOT about the RFBs, they are pretty judicious on where they can go. And once we get our walkability study done and some of the engineering that we're looking towards, we'll have a better idea of where and if we're going to be able to put any more of the RFBs out.
Great, thanks.
My pleasure.
Okay, I don't see any more questions.
Then I'll hand it back to Veronica, and she's going to talk a little bit about Jeff Street.
So, am I unmuted? I am. All right. So, one thing that we looked at when we were considering bike routes and then bike lanes was the flow of traffic in the center of town and how congested that can be. So, Bill, could you give me the next slide, which should be a map? So we looked at this and we thought, all right, we have a one-way street here and a one-way street here and one way, just kind of making a big circle around. And we thought, well, if Jeff's were one way, we could put a contraflow bike lane in there, thinking more as far as safety goes. This is a two-way road right now. And to put a bike lane on either side of the road doesn't really work. But it could still be a bike route and the bicyclists would be on their own. But we were thinking safety-wise, you could do this circle in the other direction. And so for that, we could put a contraflow if this were a single lane of traffic and then a single bike lane. So that was our thought. And looking at Jeff Street, it would be two-way right here to Town Hall was what we had in mind. And again, this is a proposal. One of the reasons for this information session tonight is for people to weigh in on their thoughts on this. It just made sense that if you made the right here, this would be the direction to make it one way. And then you could make a right or a left here coming out of Jeff's. And it would perhaps have less effect on the traffic flow at the common than if you went the other way with the one-way direction. So it was a thought that we had. It seemed reasonable to consider that as a one-way street for safety purposes for both bicyclists and people driving cars if there are bicycles on there. Our thought was with the rail trail, which is right in here, coming in, people would be biking up there for parking or biking to the town common to park. And it just kind of made sense. So we thought we would throw it out and see what people thought of that. So that was one of the proposals that we have and that we are considering. So Bill, are there any questions on that?
Yes, I've got two questions on that and one a general question. So let me give you first the two questions related to the one-way. The first question is, how will the one-way road be handled by emergency personnel?
Could you bring the map back? I did speak with Chief Sartell about this, and he didn't have a huge problem at all with it. If you're thinking about fire, I guess that would bring you up to the lights to come in here if there was something here that needed to be addressed for an emergency. I don't know who asked the questions. Are they thinking about coming onto Jeff Street from here? I imagine if it were here, the fire truck would just go in the opposite direction. I don't know if they're required to follow. You can't see where I'm pointing. So Bill, if you took your pointer and followed from the center fire station and went up to Jeff Street.
So you can see my pointer, right?
I can.
Okay, so here's the fire station. Presumably the fire truck goes up this way. Is it allowed to go the wrong way up the one-way street?
Yeah, that would be the question, I suppose. And in emergency, I think it would be, but I don't know. Otherwise, you're right, it would have to go up to the lights. So we will have a discussion with Chief Boynton. I don't know that they actually come out of there and go up Jeff Street. I think they, with sirens blaring, go through the traffic lights right there at the Common to make that left. Much easier to do with a fire truck than to make a left onto Jeff's and then a left onto 119. If they were heading to, some they cover in this area that wouldn't be covered by the West Townsend Fire Station, or if they had more, needed more equipment at a fire on the west side of town. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Just a second, one more, next question. On behalf of Riverbank Terrace residents, we respectfully request the one-way to be pushed back to the corner of Riverbank and Jeff's to allow exit from Riverbank Terrace.
All right, we can take that into consideration in our meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple other questions. As a resident of Jeff Street, I think we need to find out how emergencies are handled, and I think we've discussed that. The fire trucks cannot make that left onto Jeff's Street anyway. Emmy said. I don't know if you want to follow up with that, Emmy. Nope. Okay. But yes.
Not me, Emmy. I think that I don't know if I'm thinking somebody in my family is on my other account.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who, but not me, Emmy.
Oh, Emmy too. I got it.
Emmy too.
So
Okay.
in that case, the fire truck, if the fire were on Jeff Street, they would be going up to the light at the Common anyway, making the left and then coming down Jeff Street in the direction that we are considering one way, because that is a difficult turn for a fire truck. They typically go through the lights in the Common, at least that's what and so I expect they would do the same. So the direction that we're putting it in would be the correct direction for emergency vehicles to address a situation right there on Jeff's.
Okay, I've got a question, Veronica.
Sure.
Who would be in charge of making this decision about changing a two-way street to a one-way street in Townsend?
Actually, it is a vote of the selectmen. It is a town road. Because we are not making it one way at 119, MassDOT is not as concerned. They did ask, they looked at this. We don't need a permit for that or anything like that. We also don't need a study. And as long as it is not affecting, I'm circling those traffic lights right at 13 and 119. If it is not affecting that intersection and the lights at that intersection, which this more than likely would not, there is nothing that MassDOT needs to do. Route 13, where Jeff centers Route 13, is a town road. And because of that, it is the selectmen who make the final decision on this. So if we choose to do this, we would need to talk to the selectmen at the Tuesday meeting on March 2nd. And Shared Streets and Spaces is on the agenda, which will be published tomorrow. So That's the answer to that. There is no one-way road ordinance in Townsend. I learned that in the process of working on this grant with everyone. So we asked a lot of questions.
Okay, I'm going to switch to general questions. So we do have a general question here.
Okay.
Which is, how can the public access this presentation for closer study?
This presentation will be, it's being recorded right now, and it will be posted on the town YouTube channel. So you can see everything there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was going to wonder if you have a soft copy like a PowerPoint or a PDF.
Oh, I could provide that. Probably the best thing would be to put it up on the website. We could put it up as handouts on the website. I could check into that.
Yeah, I think that's what they're referring to. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Once we have finalized everything that we're going to do over the next few days, this has to be submitted next week, Thursday, or no later than Friday. So we will be finalizing. And once we're finalized as far as what we actually put into the proposal, I am going to request that we have a lovely sign document that's more than what you just saw today for every single sign. Emily did a great job on that. We have a crosswalk document. We have a bike lanes document. So once we have that finalized, we will post it on the website along with the grant verbiage, so everybody can see it once it goes into the state.
So I don't see any more questions on the chat, but of course I'll throw one more in, general one. What is the overall budget that this grant is asking for?
The grant, the most we can request is 300,000. And tomorrow we're going to sit down. We have to make the final decisions as far as crosswalks go. Are we going to put in ADA compliant ramps at particular crosswalks? And if we are, which ones will they be? So we have to consider that. The signage, Emily, if you're on and can hear me, do you have a number, an approximate number for that?
So the signage, not including the "You Are Here" signs, are upwards of about $10,000.
All right. The "You Are Here's," Emmy, those are in the neighborhood of
I think that's correct, Emily. It's 18,000 each. I don't have the sheet right in front of me, but no, actually, I think it was 18 for two.
Okay.
And then we are requesting for the third one. And this gives me a chance to say a huge thank you to Jim Smith and his crew. They've been wonderful in answering our questions and helping us understand the schematics and what kind of labor goes into working with this. So I just wanted to throw that out there as we're talking about putting some signs in. Installation is going to be a big part of this.
So we will, so if you just look at the signs, and that's around 50,000. We will have paint for striping for the bike lanes, should we wind up doing those, it's paint that we are buying. The RRFB is around 50,000, I believe, for that. All total, it could be in the 150 to 200,000 because we will have an installation charge, an engineering charge that we can put in, and funding for the striping company that will do the striping for us. So the install of the signs will be done by the highway department. And so we don't have the final number yet because we wanted to present tonight and then discuss tomorrow what we think we can put in for. So we're probably looking, I'm guessing on this, in the 200,000, maybe a little bit less than that. Does that answer, Bill?
Yep. So I got another question
Sure.
about maintenance in general, and particular who would maintain the bike repair stations.
There are only 2 bike repair stations. One of them is behind the rec center. So that will probably fall to the rec center. Emmy, you can jump in here at any time.
Yeah, so the one behind again, the maneuverability around town has not been ideal, but putting together a cycling club. So dues from that, as well as any fees for the cycling clinics and repair station information nights, etc., those will go towards maintenance of our station for security purposes. With us being right there at Town Hall, we do have really great visibility as well as security cameras. So it's a good spot for a easily accessed bike repair station.
Does that answer?
Okay.
Bill?
I think so. Well, we're one. In April 20, there was a fire turn onto Jeff Street. I think we should do this further, which I believe that's what your decision was to, you're still.
Yes. Yes, we will.
Okay.
Because that's definitely, we don't want to. We will take the time to finalize that, just to make a list and do work on everything that's been Linda. Do you have something you can add to that?
I don't think so. We're team tomorrow. On Monday, we're actually a secondary meeting with
Questions.
All right. Well, Joan made a comment that, another thing that's
Can do is we do need feedback for placement of those signs, but we do have alternatives that we've been discussing to that. Should the Historic District Commission, depending on their review of our proposal for that signage.
All right, so we got another general question. If the grant is not awarded, will you still be able to move forward with this project?
We will be looking for other grants to allow us to do this if it is not awarded. So the vision is there. The vision is even bigger than this little area in the center of town. I mean, we didn't address the harbor area. We didn't address West Townsend. We would like connectivity to the neighborhoods in town, like to Timberley Park and up towards Emery Road and towards West Townsend. So this is the start, we hope, of a long line of searching for grant funds to do things that allow, I mean, I guess the pandemic has made us see that we live in this community. Let's make it more than just driving back and forth to work. We live here. And how do we make it safe and inviting, and also bring people from other communities in? You know, that when they come through Townsend, they'll think, hey, we should stop and look. This looks like a nice place to be. So we will look for other opportunities if we are not fortunate enough to be awarded this grant. So.
Great. Well, that's the end of the questions. I did one more, Veronica, just to be clear. This is 100% grant, or is there a local match required?
The wonderful thing about this grant is there is no match required at all, and the funds are awarded outright. So if we get it, we will receive 100% of the funding. Now we have to use that funding for the purpose we intended it to be used for. And we do have to return anything that we don't get done in that 2-month time period. But that's the wonder. These were their CARES Act. It's federal grant money that was awarded to the state that Governor Baker and the Lieutenant Governor thought would be good to get out to communities, to get people outside in their communities. We should take advantage of it and, you know, see if we can get it. So it's an opportunity.
All right, you got some positive feedback here. Sounds like a wonderful project. My children listened into the presentation, 7 and 11 years old, and enjoyed your ideas. Another one, sounds great. Thank you for all your time and efforts. And taking off my moderator hat, I just want to say that, you know, I know what it is to put a grant together like this, and you guys have really done some great work for, in my own personal opinion, something that can really make the town better. So, I mean, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. And I also want to say that with this grant, the state made available funds for planning. So through the Bar Foundation, they made available planners that could help us. So we have had a wonderful planner, Margaret Kent from Kittleson and Associates, working with us and helping us see what was possible in town. She helped explain the bike routes when Joan was talking about the bike lanes. That was Margaret, and she's been wonderful. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great.
And no more questions, Bill? Nothing else in the chat?
Nope, just people saying thank you and great work.
Thank you to everyone for attending. We'll post the final plan on the town website, so look for that on March 5th, and have a good evening. Good night, everyone.
Great, thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Veronica.
You're welcome.